Hello, Claire Cantro with Spread the Well here again. So this is video 3 of my stretch series, and I'm going to kind of go into, I alluded to this in video 2, the group of people who right now I would ask just stop stretching, table stretching. So this group of individuals are what I would kind of classify as people with some bit of hypermobility. So when we look at pretty much every disorder out there, it's a spectrum, right? So we've got people with connective tissue dysplasias, meaning that for whatever reason their connective tissue is not quite as solid and sound as we would want. And on one end, on the milder end of that spectrum, those people are just more flexible, right? Arguably that can make them better athletes. It can make them better gymnasts. It can make them better swimmers, all of that kind of stuff. So that's, on one end of the connective tissue dysplasia spectrum or the hypermobility spectrum. On the other end, the far kind of more serious, potentially more problematic end of the spectrum, you have kind of genetic disorders like Ehlers-Danlos or Marfan syndrome or these other things that are truly connective tissue problems. And what I mean by that is that those disorders, in addition to just my musculoskeletal or my myofascial system being a little bit more flexible, which helps me be a gymnast, the problem on the more advanced end of that spectrum is that every part of our body and every system, every organ system in our body is made up of connective tissue. And so when that connective tissue is very problematic, you start having problems with how our systems operate, okay? So spectrum, right? But if you're someone who has fallen into that, where you were told your whole life you were hypermobile, double jointed, you can bend things back, if you look at your elbow hyperextends a lot, those sort of things. You may have been the kid who can perpetually W sit or always sit on your legs, and basically you, compared to your peers, may have just looked like this very flowy, billowy, super flexible individual. These people oftentimes, and by these people I mean my patients who I see and who I've interacted with, they oftentimes want to go to that end range positioning to get that stretch. So I'll be working on them and they have buttock pain or whatnot, and they are just like, they are stretching their piriformis and their glute and their hamstring, and they're, touching the toe over the head, and it's like something's about to dislocate, and they feel like they can't ever get that stretch deep enough. And I would argue that those patients are not actually, their body is not craving lengthening of that tissue. It's giving the false sense of I need stretching, when in actuality you need stability. Okay, so this is a group of individuals who relies a little bit more on their muscles and their myofascial system to create stability around their joints, because their connective tissue, their ligaments, their tendons, those sort of things are more loosey-goosey. So what ends up happening a lot of times is, to try to stabilize a specific joint, you get the muscles around that joint kind of overreacting and getting too tight, or instead of doing what they're designed to do, they get trigger points, they get pain and uncomfortable and all of that stuff. And there is this social belief system that we have. I see it in everyone, that we think that the answer is stretching, and it is not. So in these individuals, again, what I would recommend, much like I talked about in the previous episode, is not necessarily the rebounding type of stuff, but I would recommend more of a releasing, so trigger point releasing using balls, foam rollers, deep pressure, those muscles that feel like they need to be stretched, when in reality probably just if they need to be released. And then after they're released, figuring out ways to stabilize those. So in a more productive way, how do I get those glute muscles, those piriformis muscles, the proximal hamstring muscles to activate in a way that creates some stability, some functional stability, but doesn't create pain and doesn't become problematic for me, okay? So again, these individuals, I think we're trying to satisfy a specific need in their body with stretching, when stretching is really not the right thing in these instances, okay? So I would say that these are the individuals that, like, okay, you know, if you're a runner and you're hypermobile, and you have always stretched before I run, well, okay, let's table that for a second. Let's do some foam rolling. Let's do some, get a lacrosse ball or a tennis ball, do some rolling around in the glute just to kind of warm those muscles up, okay? Trying something like that in the place of stretching can be much more effective. And of course, you know, I can go into more detail about, you know, well then once we release those things, how do we create some productive stability around joints to where these muscles don't continue to do that. So stick around and we'll keep kind of navigating through some of these questions.